Hello, it is M.E.C, and you're listening to the Well of Being podcast. Today we're talking about confidence, and I say we're talking about confidence because I think a lot of us have a notion of what we think confidence is, but it doesn't actually align to the real definition. So let's unpack that. What do we think of when we think of confidence? I think of someone who's a boss or an entrepreneur or at the top of their field or career. I think I often think of someone who's opinionated and strong-willed and outgoing and makes their presence known, aka they take up a lot of space, but in a good way. At least that's how we perceive it. I also kind of probably imagine them wearing some sort of power suit, maybe a colorful power suit. For some reason, I don't know why this concept of wearing what people often associate as like masculine business wear is associated with confidence, but it is. And I think a lot of people talk about it. So whether you're non-binary or you're a woman, people often, regardless, will imagine someone who's confident to be wearing a suit or pants, which is also something we should unpack. Then I also think of someone who has all their crap together. Okay, this person is on top of their stuff, and it seems like their life is organized. But I want to think about the fact that none of those things is actually what confidence is. Not one of them. Like, there is no direct correlation between those two. Those things don't have anything to do with the actual definition of confidence. That's just a perception that we see in society of what someone who is confident looks like. Now, I love myself a dictionary definition, and the definition of confidence when relating to oneself is a feeling of self-assurance arising from one's appreciation of one's own abilities and qualities. Let's think about that. There was no mention of power suits. There's no mention of being the boss in any space, shape, or form. You don't have to be opinionated. You don't have to be outgoing. It is simply the fact that you trust yourself and believe in your own abilities and qualities. That's confidence. And I think when you break it down that way, it can seem very abstract. So there are very subtle ways that somebody can manifest confidence. And I think that these are true examples of what confidence is. This is not like the media perception of what we associate with confidence, like I mentioned before. Things like trusting your decisions. This is something I'm horrible at. I have a really hard time making decisions a lot of the time because I feel like once I make a decision, sometimes I'm like, oh, maybe I'll go back and change it because I don't trust myself, or I feel like something's going to happen that is wrong. Another thing that I think is a subtle way that confidence manifests itself in is feeling comfortable in your own skin. Like you are okay and more than okay with being yourself. You're happy being yourself, or at the very least, you accept yourself for who you are. I also think of someone who does not contort themselves for other people. Now, don't get me wrong. This doesn't mean not being compassionate or modifying the way that you speak to somebody to communicate effectively. This just means that in the process of doing those things, you're not changing who you are or your values for this person. You are putting your values above that. That is your core. And then I think of the fact that someone who is confident can accept a compliment. I cannot accept compliments for the life of me. I find it extremely difficult. Someone will say, oh, M.E.C, I like your jacket. And I'm immediately looking at their person, trying to find something I can compliment about their outfit or about their self, something that they've worked on that is cool recently, because I feel like I don't deserve their compliment unless I have something else to reciprocate with. A lot of the time, I'm sitting there being like, oh, I like your pants. And it's a genuine thing. Like, I'm not going to compliment somebody on something unless I genuinely like it. But the fact that I can't just accept the compliment and move on because I feel like there's some sort of social code that's broken if I don't reciprocate is weird, right? The person gave you a compliment because they wanted to give you a compliment. They didn't want anything back in return. most likely, most likely. And this also happens a lot more when we're talking about skills. If someone's good at something or just finished a project and they did really well on it, and someone compliments them on how they did, a lot of times people will negate the other person by being like, no, I'm not actually that good at this. It was just a stroke of luck. When someone was genuinely complimenting your skill, the things that you're good at. This happened to me very recently, actually. One of my close friends had given me a compliment on a singing performance I had done. And the first thing said was, oh, no, I'm not that good at singing. When, in all actuality, that's a skill I know I'm good at. I just felt the need to say no because I had this idea that I have to be humble, and to be humble is to not recognize your own value or worth or skill. And so in order to not be haughty or overly obnoxious, I felt like I had to say, no, I'm not good at this skill, even though I know I am. I'm good at that thing. And I think that's such a weird compulsion that many of us have. I often give compliments to people and they will say, no, it was nothing. I didn't actually do it that well. It wasn't me. We take the skills that we have and put them outside of ourselves as if we did not accomplish that ourselves, as if we're actually not good at it. And often these are with skills that we know that we have worked hard at skills that we've been praised for time and time again, and we feel the need to continue negating that attention because it feels weird for someone to tell us something good about ourselves. It feels weird to be praised and to just sit there with it. To sit there with someone else's praise is uncomfortable. I perceive a small act of confidence to be just accepting the compliment and saying, thank you, I worked really hard on that. I really appreciate that. Why is that not the first thing that I come up with when someone compliments me? A good question. And another small example of someone being confident in a subtle way is correcting someone without shrinking yourself. I've talked about this before. Often when I know something that someone said is incorrect or wrong or offensive, when I'm going to approach that person, I feel the need to soften the blow a bit by questioning my own intelligence. And the way it'll look is this. Someone says something that's inaccurate, and I'll come up to them with knowing the correct answer full well and say, I'm not quite sure, but I think that the answer to that is actually this, not that. I could correct this person respectfully without questioning my knowledge. I know that the answer is X, right? I can say, hey, by the way, the answer to that is actually this. Just if that helps, cool. If it doesn't help, let me know. You're giving them the opportunity to either accept that information or discard it, and you're doing it in a polite, respectful way. You're not making them appear silly or trying to embarrass them. But it doesn't require you questioning your own intelligence. That's not necessary to correct someone else. And similarly, when we are receiving feedback, if someone says, hey, by the way, it would be better if you did it this way, or here's your feedback for this week, or you're not doing this correctly, let me show you how to do it. That often comes as a personal blow to me, and to, I think, a lot of people feel that way. When feedback is meant exactly as that, like to help you improve so that you can do it better the next time. It doesn't mean that you're dumb, it doesn't mean that you're stupid, but I think when I receive feedback sometimes, I feel very hypersensitive to the fact that, oh man, I did this wrong, so therefore I must be dumb, or I'm not good enough, or I don't deserve to be here, and that's when like the imposter syndrome starts seeping in there. Even if you don't tell yourself that explicitly, like the notion that feedback is bad, that if I get feedback it means I'm not good at this or it means I'm bad, is not a growth mindset. And that's something that is hard to have. People with growth mindsets, aka the belief that learning involves making mistakes and failing and understanding that those faults do not prevent you from achieving success. In fact, they are part of your progression to achieving success. And you just have to take the information from each of those blows, so to speak, and apply it to the future. And then that's what growth mindset is. Now, that can sound all good and dandy, and like we want to do that, but when it comes to actually receiving the feedback, it feels bad, right? Like it feels, oh, I'm dumb, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. It makes you feel insecure, right? Because you know you're not doing something correctly or that you're not succeeding yet. But you can't necessarily see yourself succeeding in the future when you're feeling that feeling of failure now. So I think while people idolize the concept of growth mindset, it is much harder to put into practice when you actually receive that feedback. A lovely trait that I would love to have that is associated with confidence is being able to receive feedback and not take it personally and just use it as my progression forward. And I think sometimes people do this in ways that just are so subtle. They'll say, thank you for that feedback. They apply it and they move on. They don't think about it at night at 2 a.m. like me and think, oh man, that person definitely thinks I'm an idiot because they told me this piece of feedback. That's something that I would love to hone in on and master and get better at, because right now, your girl's not good at it, okay? I'm not. And the last thing that I think is a subtle example of confidence that is very, very powerful is being able to disregard the opinions of people who are not serving you or the negative words of people who do not support you, and just take those words and let them roll off your back. That is extremely difficult. I remember growing up, I was often told that I had a thin skin, and I hated hearing that. I still hate hearing it, and I'll tell you why. Because I'm told all the time to be empathetic, and that's something I excel at. I really resonate with other people's emotions, oftentimes at the expense of my own mental health, because I just take other people's emotions too much into the way that I feel. And so I've been told that that's a good thing a lot of the time, like be empathetic, like it's good to be compassionate, things like that. And then when I, get negative comments on videos that I make, or maybe I'm interacting with somebody at work who just doesn't have a friendly demeanor, let's just say that, and they say something that is mean or harsh or unkind, I take that so personally. And I wish I did not. And it's something that I struggle to balance, because you're being told, be empathetic, be aware of other people's feelings, but also disregard people who don't serve you. And it's hard to disregard when you're so open. That's something that I would love to get better at. So we have all these very subtle but very effective ways that we can see confidence manifest. They align with the definition of what confidence is. It doesn't have anything to do with this media representation of this boss individual who is overbearing and has a lot of opinions and has all their crap together. I want to take some time to talk about the role that personality and identity plays in confidence, because it plays a very big role. I'm going to start out, number one, by saying shyness is not the opposite of confidence. You can be shy and be confident. I've interacted with tons of people who may not actively seek out social conversations, may not be the loudest person in the room or be the first to talk, but when they do speak, it is intentional. They are believing in the things that they're saying and the things that they're doing, and they have a very strong value system that other people cannot touch. Often, our concept of outgoing equals confident overpowers our ability to understand that someone can be shy and confident, and that being the loudest person in the room or the most sociable or whatever have you does not necessarily correlate to that person being confident. For example, I am a pretty outgoing person. I feel very comfortable talking to you in this space, but I acknowledge that I have a lot of progress to make in terms of becoming confident in my own abilities and skills and qualities. I really do. A very large part of it is the fact that confidence deals a lot with how we think we fit our own expectations and how we think we fit the expectations of others. And it really depends heavily on whose expectations you value more. I'm gonna let that sit, because if you value other people's expectations over your own, or you value other people's views of yourself more than your own, it's going to be very difficult to be confident, because you're going to be constantly striving to please other people. I'm not saying people pleasers can't be confident. I think it's going to be very, very difficult, because you want to make sure that your value system and the way that you're behaving is in accordance with the way you want to behave. And if you're constantly being dragged left and right by other people's whims and meeting other people's expectations, it is hard to act in accordance with your values and be confident about that and to trust yourself. And this is where I want to touch on intersectionality, because the concept of the way that you were raised, the places that you've held in society, the privileges that you have, the disadvantages that you've dealt with, very much affect your confidence level. And you can be privileged in one space and not privileged in other spaces. And people might perceive you as someone who is privileged and therefore you should be confident, and maybe you're not. And that happens very frequently, because other identities that you hold that might be less visible to people might be affecting the way that you view yourself or the way that you trust your own decisions or your values. And frankly, if one part of your identity, whether it be race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, sexuality, gender presentation, personal choices, if you're the black sheep of the family, if people have questioned the way that you perceive social spaces in the past, for instance, if you have ADHD or if you have autism or if you have any other condition like social anxiety where people have told you that you have perceived a social situation incorrectly, you're not going to feel comfortable trusting yourself again to perceive social situations well. And so it's much harder to trust your own opinions and the way that you perceive things moving forward, because people have ingrained in you that you can't. And so in any identity that you hold, if that identity is unseen or frequently invalidated, you're going to feel less confident. And it's something you have to be aware of. And it's really difficult to address these things because no one wants to talk about it, because it's uncomfortable. I will be personal here, and in my own life, I think my race often affects my confidence level when it comes to being perceived as intelligent or not. I've talked about this with my therapist a lot, and we've done a lot of heavy digging into my childhood, into the fact that I was in a predominantly white school. Specifically, I was in a lot of high-achieving classes where the majority of people in those classes were not people of color, and I was a token of sorts. I was frequently put in positions, not on purpose likely, but I was, where I had to represent my entire race in terms of intellectual ability, where people would question whether I was supposed to be there because I didn't fit the perceived intelligence level based on my race, being black. Even when I was in first grade, I remember entering a classroom and having the teacher talk to me in a very specific way. And it was a different way than my white peers were being talked to. And after the teacher heard the way that I speak and the vocabulary that I use, she increased the complexity of the way that she spoke to me. She bumped up the level because she realized that her initial perception of how I should talk doesn't match what's in her head. This happens a lot. And I'm not saying that people were trying to do this on purpose, but I took notice of it. And so moving forward, I often would do things to make sure that people perceive me as intelligent. That was very important to me. And I think I have a slight chip on my shoulder because I think when I go into a room that people will think that I am less smart than other people because I'm black, because of these experiences that I've had. And so by being aware of this dynamic that I have with myself, it is hard for me to go into a situation where I'm receiving feedback about my, grades or my performance, because I feel like it reflects poorly on my intelligence or my ability to be in a space or to deserve to be there. It just makes me feel less than, because I've been trying so hard to represent myself and people who look like me, and I feel like I've fallen short. That is a very personal example on my end of how your identity can play a role into how you perceive yourself as confident or not, or how you go into spaces potentially not feeling the most confident. Now that we've learned a bit about what confidence truly is and the things that affect our confidence, what can we do? Something that I've been doing is really talking to myself in a way that is much kinder than I used to talk to myself. For instance, I mentioned the fact that if I receive feedback, often I'll start thinking along the lines of, oh, it must mean I don't deserve to be here, I'm not intelligent. If I feel myself going towards that kind of self-talk, I will stop myself and say, listen, I'm a learner in this space. I'm not perfect by any means, and I'm going to get better. And that's something that's important to me. And by talking myself down from those negative self-talk spirals, I'm really trying to rewire the way that I view myself and the way that I interact with situations that make me uncomfortable or make me question my confidence or my trust in myself. I think affirmations go a really long way. They're cheesy, I won't even lie. When I say them, I physically feel myself cringe. But when people talk about affirmations, I think people skip to, I am worthy, I am XYZ. It can be something as simple as, I'm learning right now, and I know it feels like I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm doing pretty well. I'm actually doing better than I think. I'm not giving myself enough credit. Kind of giving yourself an objective view of the situation rather than an emotional view of how it feels, and kind of taking a step back and being like, if I was a person observing the situation, how would I perceive it? Not how it feels right now, which is also important. I'm not saying to disregard your feelings, but often those will cloud our ability to interpret the situation. I'll give you another example from my own life. I was recently assisting with a procedure as part of my medical school education, and when you go into a procedure and you're a student, you don't know where to stand, you don't know where to go, you don't know what to do. You are a person who is taking up space and is less efficient than everyone else in the room, and everyone else knows what to do. So you immediately feel the most stupid by far. And so I'm in the room, I'm helping with the procedure, and someone who is in the room asks me to move. And so I, shuffle over to the side thinking I gave them enough room. And then they yell, literally yell at me, move! And I was so mortified. And as I tell you this story, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but at the time, I just felt so vulnerable because I already felt very disadvantaged in that space because I knew I didn't know what was going on. It was my first time being in that type of procedure. I didn't know where to stand. And this person just immediately went to the heart of where I was uncomfortable and yelled at me in front of everyone else without giving me a chance. And it felt unfair, number one, is how it felt. I also felt very stupid. I can physically feel tears filling my eyes. When you're trying not to cry and you have this curtain of water in your eyes and everything is blurry and you're trying so hard not to let those tears fall because you don't want someone to see you cry. That is what I was doing. And so I told myself in that moment, this person who I'm interacting with right now is not very nice. That is an objective fact. She could have been nicer. Number two, I didn't know where to go, and I did the best that I could. Number three, I fixed the situation, I ended up moving, and it's over. I don't have to take the situation and extrapolate it to my deservingness to be here, my intelligence, because it has nothing to do with that. This was an unfortunate situation that I happened to be in, and it reflects nothing upon me. It reflects very much upon the person who screamed at me for no reason. And that's how I chose to deal with it, and I felt the tears settle in my eyes, and I stood up a little straighter, and I allowed myself to take up a little bit more space than I normally would have. That was a moment that is so small, and it seems inconsequential and silly, but I felt a shift there in the way that I talk to myself. And it's not a habit yet, but I can feel it be better than when it was before, and I think that matters. The small times that you take those conversations with yourself to check in and be like, in this moment, this is what's happening, and I need to make a slight adjustment to the way that I'm talking to myself. That matters, and that's how I think that we can gain that confidence or start to hone in on those practices that exude confidence, because ultimately it's about how we talk to ourselves and how we believe in ourselves and our abilities and how much we stick to our values when we behave. That's it. So that's my spiel on confidence. Thank you so much for being here. We've had a very large influx of new listeners, and I'm so grateful for all of you. So please feel free, if you're new, if you've been here for a minute. I have an Instagram link in the description. I have a Pinterest link in the description. I would love for you to DM me there, and we can talk about things. And also, if you have topics that you want me to talk about for the podcast, I would love to do that there as well. I hope that you feel seen, heard, and a little bit calmer than you did before. And I hope that the rest of your day goes well. And if it doesn't, that's okay. It doesn't reflect on tomorrow. Have a great rest of your week. I will see you next week. Bye.